Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's going on, Fantasy Champs? It is Wednesday. Hopefully, it's Wednesday when the show is supposed to come out. But
that would mean football's tomorrow.
That would mean football is tomorrow. Hopefully, the show actually launches on Wednesday. I think it will. But my name is Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me, as always, was Poppin' Ricardo.
What's going on?
We got an interesting show for you today. Our top breakout running backs for the 2022 fantasy football season. This is these episodes, because I think next week we do quarterbacks and tight ends, and then we jump into our top riskiest players. Top riskiest players after that. But breakouts are like, this is it. This is all of the research that we've done over the last 6 months, all compiled into one video where we give you the guys that we think are going to break out and actually help you absolutely dominate your fantasy leagues. I think, finding the two areas I find the most success in fantasy football leagues is finding league winners, obviously, snagging the Cooper Kupps and the Deebo Samuels of the world, either in the mid or early rounds. But getting guys that are breakouts is super key, especially when you're talking about like running backs and wide receivers, because you can get them in the 4th, 5th, or 6th round.
Right.
And you don't have to use like number 1 pick value, so you can snag a Christian McCaffrey, and then grab 2 more running backs after him, and still have the opportunity to draft some of the breakout wide receivers that we talked about on the last show. So today we're going to talk about breakout running backs. These ones are harder to peg this year, I'll tell you. But before we do that, check out our website, fantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcast platforms, please leave a review and share this podcast with your friends. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, like, and comment down below any questions you may have. Like I said, super hard to project out the breakout running backs this year. I feel like every year there's like 27. And I'm like, I don't know what to choose from. This year, I looked at like the top 20 running backs, and they're all old.
Yep.
With the exception of some of the younger guys that already broke out. But I'm like, man, this is going to be hard to project these running backs this year. But there are 3 guys that Rick and I really, really like going into the season. And we'll get into them right now. You ready to go, Rick?
Yeah, we can start right away.
All right, let's get it. I feel like the intro sequence was real fast, but it's been 3 minutes, so whatever.
Oh, that's okay.
But anyway, the number 1 guy that we have on this list right now, this is in no particular order, by the way.
Yeah.
But number 1, we have Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Rick, why don't you let us know why Travis Etienne is a breakout running back?
So far early in camp, there has been reports that Etienne has been a star. He's been very, very good, and is definitely earning a spot on the team. First of all, I think Trevor Lawrence is going to have a much improved year 2. He was with the worst coach in the league. The scheme was awful. Everything about the Jaguars last year was awful. And now he's in a much better situation in year 2. Obviously, if you believe in the prospect that was Trevor Lawrence, he was considered one of the best prospects in the last 10 years at the quarterback position. So you would expect a good year 2, which should be good for Etienne, because not only will Etienne be the starting running back on the Jaguars, he's also going to get a lot of targets. Obviously, we know about their college connection, but last season, according to PFF, the player with the highest check down rate in the NFL was Trevor Lawrence at 11%.
Oh, yeah. It wasn't even Mac Jones. Suck an egg.
Mac Jones was number 8. So, and the guys ahead of him were Tyler Heineke, Gardner Minshew, and Teddy Bridgewater. So that's not exactly the. Anyway, forgetting Mac Jones, Trevor Lawrence was number 1 at that 11.3%.
Yeah.
So very high, but very good for Travis Etienne. You would expect him to be a pass catching specialist, and the guys in fantasy that get those pass catching work are great, even if they're not great on the ground, even if they're just average on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you look at guys like Austin Eckler, Alvin Kamara,
right.
Christian McCaffrey, now DeAndre Swift. I think you can make an argument into that role. Aaron Jones as well. Those guys are all great fantasy players, not just because of what they can do on the ground, but what they do in the air. And I think Travis Etienne has a real shot to join that club because of his pass catching ability. He's going to be the pass catching back, and he'll probably be the complete workhorse until James Robinson comes back. There are positive reports about him coming back sooner than expected, so we'll see how that plays out.
Frick out of here, James Robinson.
Just to be safe, though, I wouldn't be shocked if he misses like the first week or two to kind of ease him into it.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Even if Robinson comes back, I don't think he's, we saw what Cam Akers was right when he came off the Achilles. It's going to take a while before James Robinson is back. I think Etienne will have a majority of the carries, and he will most certainly have majority of the targets, which is the big thing, in an improved offense. He has that sort of upside because of that pass catching, which makes him the breakout option that he is.
Yeah, and there's also been reports that he is the, quote, star of Jaguars training camp.
Yeah, that's what
so far. I love Etienne. I loved Etienne coming out, and like Rick said, the pass catching part of his game, like when they drafted him, I was like, all right. I mean, James Robinson,
it was a gross pick,
is good, but I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, what?
Yeah, it was
why
definitely
would you
a gross pick?
So I think the intention for ex-head coach, freaking don't even remember your name. Urban Meyer. I think the goal was to use him in the slot, because I remember last year in training camp, I was
Kadarius
seeing videos.
Toney, that's who they wanted.
Yeah, essentially. Oh my God. Idiots. But essentially, in camp, they were using him in the slot and in pass catching reps, and that's where they wanted to put him essentially. And I don't know how much opportunity he would have gotten on the ground last year in that system, but like, this is going to be a guy that's very similar to the role that Alvin Kamara plays.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Or Austin Eckler, for example.
Yep.
And these are guys that don't typically run for over 225 carries. They're usually hovering right around 200 carries. Maybe, Kamara, if he's lucky, reaches 200. But I think Etienne is...
Kamara last year did, but before that, he never did.
Yeah, before, when Drew Brees was on the team, he never really reached that threshold. But Etienne is one of those guys that I think could hit that 200 rushing attempt threshold, which is totally splittable, if that makes sense, with James Robinson. Yep. If they run it 400 times or 500 times or something like that, then James Robinson can get his, and Travis Etienne can get his as well. But the plus side of Travis Etienne is that pass catching and his ability to come out of the backfield, to move into the slot. And I think on any passing down that they have Trevor Lawrence on the field, you're going to see Travis Etienne on the field as well. You're not going to see James Robinson on the field for pass catching downs. But the big thing is that Etienne is the number one guy for the Jacksonville Jaguars right now. I'm going to assume that at least 4 weeks of time are missed for James Robinson. I would have to take a guess. And by the time that James Robinson comes back, I think Travis Etienne is just going to have the job. So I've stood by that all offseason. We don't have any analytics to back up what we're saying, because there is no analytics to share besides what he did in college.
I do have one analytics, but yeah, it is from college. You know how many targets he got his senior year?
What?
So with Trevor Lawrence at the quarterback, he only played in 12 games. He had 60 targets out of the backfield.
I think that's all they
in
play.
12 games. Well, the year before that, he had 15 games. So,
college football playoffs.
Yeah, so that might be included. But still, 60 targets in 12 games is really, really good.
And I think
for a college running back.
I think the connection between Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne as well, like playing in the same college, that makes a difference. And I think a lot of people underrate that. Like before, I think I underrated it last year, because the NFL is a different beast than college football.
Oh yeah, I mean it doesn't. But it's not a non-factor either.
Look what Joe Burrow did with Jamar Chase last year.
Yeah,
like there's no reason to believe that Etienne will not or can't have that kind of connection with Trevor Lawrence, and I think that probably will happen. So, and as a 4th round pick, it's easy money for me. Like I am I'm impressed with what I'm seeing out of camp so far from Travis Etienne. I'm excited to see what he does in the regular season. And I just hope that Jacksonville, Doug Peterson is he's uttered the words. This is pre-training camp back in June, but he uttered the words 3 down back when healthy, talking about James Robinson, which is like, what are you doing, Doug? Not this again. I can't stand you, Doug Peterson. It's a brickhead. It just reminds me of the days with Miles Sanders, and I just yelled at my TV.
Oh,
what are you doing?
Days of Miles Sanders, as in like 2 years ago.
Yeah, which they never really occurred. He still sucks. But anyway, but ETN definitely will be a pass catching back, and in half PPR and PPR formats, he's definitely in store for a breakout. Let's move to the next guy.
Yeah,
which is Javonte Williams. Rick, what are your thoughts on Javonte?
Javonte, my guy, last year finished as the RB17, which is really, really good, actually. He had over 200 fantasy points in PPR. PPR.
Okay.
It was pretty good. I think points per game wise, there was a couple guys higher than him because he did play full 17, but was overall still very good. And that was splitting snaps completely with Melvin Gordon. He had a 50% opportunity share, 49.9 snap percentage. But he was still able to get 203 carries and 53 targets.
Yeah.
So the things with Javonte Williams this year that is different. First of all, he should get an increased workload going into his second year. I think there's been various different reports on what they expect the Broncos backfield to look like. I've seen as good as 30-70 for Javonte. I've also seen a lot of 55-45. Maybe it lands like 60-40, but I'd be okay with 60-40 for Javonte, because even that slight uptick gets him to like 225, 230 carries, 60 targets. That's going to be good enough for him because he's in very, very good running back. He showed flashes of greatness last year. His 4.4 yards per carry is something that is a lot lower than it should have been, because if you look at his efficiency, he was 6th last year in evaded tackles. He was 8th in juke rate. He was 7th in yards created per touch, 6th in the NFL in yards created. So he was very efficient with the opportunity that he had. And he also had a lot of, if you remember, we talked about this last year, he had like 3 or 4 runs for like 20 plus yards that got called back last year because of like a holding call. So if you get that in the picture as well, he had a much better year than the stats showed, and he had a pretty good year. Not to mention the fact that we've talked about this a lot, but Russell Wilson is the quarterback now, so the Broncos offense.
We're in on the Broncos, I guess.
I am 110% in on the Broncos. The Broncos offense will be better next year, so there's also room for touchdowns.
Yeah.
I mean, if the Broncos offense is as good as I think it's going to be, he could get a lot of goal line work as well, and you could be looking at double-digit touchdowns for Javonte because of that.
That's honestly what I'm looking for, though, with Javonte Williams is like last year he had 53 targets, 43 catches, 203 carries, right? Obviously, we want to see those increase. You know what I mean?
I think they will.
If he gets more than a 50% opportunity share, his carries could easily go up to 275. His target share could easily go up to like 80 targets. Like we're talking about OG back in the day, Zeke. You know what I mean? That's kind of what this guy reminds me of, because he's got the same type of build.
Yeah.
But when I look at him, it's like he just needs the opportunity, and I don't know if the Denver Broncos are smart enough to do it. But I think when you look at like goal line touches, he was number 3 in goal line touches last year. He had 37 red zone touches, which was 23rd in the NFL, not the goal line touches. But if I guarantee you, if you pull up Melvin Gordon's numbers, I don't know that he would have.
It's more.
Yeah, I would say it's more. So, but with that being said, for Javonte, if he does get a 45, a 55-45 split where he's getting majority of the opportunities, right? Does that mean that he gets more red zone touches? Does that mean he's the guy in the red zone? Because if that's the case, that flips the whole thing upside down. You know what I mean? Like it goes from 7 touchdowns to, I think around 10, 11, 12 touchdowns, which is great. But we just got to see it. And I think a lot of the bad things that, like last year, he was, he had I think it was 23.6%. He faced a base front carry rate, which is 3.2 yards a carry for him. His shotgun carry rate was 29.6, and he had 1 yard per carry on that. And his under center carry rate was 70%, which was 1 yard per carry. But he had 4.3 yards a carry against light front carry rates, and then a stacked front, he had 7.8 yards per carry, which stacked fronts he only faced 5.9% of the time. So the point of all those numbers is to say, I think he's not necessarily going to be the focus, as well as Melvin Gordon last year, in the offense in terms of what defenses are trying to stop. You have Russ there, you have Jerry Jeudy, you have Cortland Sutton.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Albert O, even, right? So I think defenses are going to have to think about everything when it comes to this team, and it's going to make it far more difficult. They're not just going to be able to stack the front. You know what I mean? They're not just going to be able to throw a base defense out there. You're probably going to see 3 wide receivers on the field at a time. They're going to have to run a lot of nickel against this team, and because of that, it's going to open up lanes for Javonte Williams and even Melvin Gordon. But I think Javonte is definitely a breakout. I think he's actually probably more of a breakout than Travis Etienne, if I had to say.
I would agree. I think so too. But they're close. 1-2.
Like Javonte, if he goes off this year, based on some of like the efficiency numbers Rick shared, like if he does that with a full workload, 300 plus opportunities, like he's a top 5 running back. It's not even like, I'm not even like, that's not a hot take for me. That's like, I think that's what he is when given the opportunity. The reason why he's not being drafted in that conversation is because he doesn't have the backfield to himself. They re-signed Melvin Gordon. They brought him back. I guarantee you, if Melvin Gordon never put on a Denver Broncos uniform again and he never re-signed, he went to Atlanta, like, Javonte would be top 10 right now in drafts.
Oh my gosh, I would probably take him like as high as 5.
It's like Rick would rip his drawers off.
I might even take him top 3 because but I'd go wild.
Yeah, Javonte is 100% a breakout. So I would do what it takes to get this guy on your team, and draft him. So let's move on to the final guy, and this one is a little bit deeper, a little bit more controversial, but it's Cam Akers. Some people are in, some people are out. Rick, where are you at?
I'm mostly in. I understand the concerns, and I'm aware of that when I'm going into my drafts. But assuming he is healthy and he plays, he's going to produce. The Rams, obviously, they have a top 5 offense in the NFL, so that alone will be good. Mm-hmm. Outside of Darrell Henderson, there's no depth on the team. It's Akers and Henderson. I think when healthy, Akers is going to get the first shot. I know he played poor coming off the Achilles injury, but that was like 5 or 6 months after an Achilles. He now has a full year of recovery. Yeah. So you have to remember, like, this is like 5-6 months after the Super Bowl, which was back in February. So he should be much more efficient on his cuts, feeling better. There's been like reports for Marlon Mack in Houston, who after he tore his Achilles last year, he wasn't quite the same player. And there's been early reports in camp saying that he looks better than what he did last year. So, I know the Achilles is a hard injury for running back to come back from, but if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be a young running back. I mean, Akers is only like 22, 23. So he's still a very young player. And he's had a lot of time to recover.
Yeah.
You look at Sean McVay's history. I know he said he wants to use both guys, but he says that every year. Historically speaking, he will use one guy for an individual game. If a guy's hot, he will ride with that running back. So I expect that to be Akers before he tore his Achilles.
Yeah.
I want to say he was on pace for like 300 carries once he got the starting role. It took him a while in his rookie season to get the starting role, obviously, because he was a rookie. But once he did, he didn't look back. In the last, freaking Sports Reference or whatever, Pro Football Reference. Okay, here we go. In the last 4 weeks of the season of his rookie season, he was on pace for, guess how many carries?
300?
366.
Oh my God.
I'm not telling you he's
Those
going
are
to do
girly.
that.
Those are girly numbers.
Right. Exactly. They are Todd Gurley numbers.
Yep.
I'm not telling you he's going to get that at all because of the Achilles, and Henderson will get some work in there. He might even get a game or two to run it. But overall, Cam Akers should be the starting running back, and that's all he really needs. He just needs to be a starting running back. He doesn't have to be the most efficient player. He just needs to get the opportunity. And if he does that in a high volume offense, he'll be a breakout running back.
We've seen from Najee, Harris a situation where, and even Le'Veon Bell back in the day, where like they might not be the most efficient running backs, but because of the opportunity that they get, it makes them, obviously it puts them in a rhythm, makes them explosive, and then because of that opportunity, just for fantasy football, like I've talked about this before, if you touch the ball 350 times in a season, you're automatically a top 5 guy.
Right.
Like, it doesn't matter if you suck at it.
I saw a stat actually the other day about that. I think it was like any player that had 350 touches, if you were running back that had that many touches, you finish as an RB1 100% of the time.
Wow.
In the last 10, here's the exact quote. 100% of running backs with 350 touches over the last 10 years have finished inside the top 5. So,
yeah.
So if you get the carries, you're gonna do it.
I was gonna say, I was listening to a podcast the other day where they heard the report that obviously Sean McVay said that he feels like he's got 2 number 1 backs on his team, and Darrell Henderson and Cam Akers, and the argument was, that maybe they will split, but that Cam Akers doesn't automatically have this job over Darrell Henderson was kind of the point, and that Darrell Henderson could take the work, and that's why Cam Akers should, you should be a little bit more hesitant on him and stuff like that. And I kind of listened to it, and I'm like, yeah, but what was the response to when he first came back, right? You had Hendo.
Right.
You had Sony Michel, whoever the heck was running the football.
They took him out.
And it was 17 attempts in the first playoff game, 24 attempts in the second playoff game, 13 and then 13.
I believe Henderson was out for most of that, but he was available in the Super Bowl. And in the Super Bowl, who was the guy that had the carries?
16 touches for Cam Akers.
And Henderson had 7.
So, to me, and that's what, a 60-40 split? Somewhere around that?
I think more than that. It's like closer to 70-30,
so,
65-35.
To me, Cam Akers is going to be the guy. It is concerning. Like, even in the Super Bowl, he sucked. He was terrible. 1.62 yards per carry, 3 receptions, 14 yards. Like, that sucks.
I don't hold the efficiency against him, though.
No, I really don't hold the efficiency against him. I think, now that he's going to have a full training camp under his belt, and a full preseason under his belt with this team, and a full year of recovery, even more than that now, and some games that he got to play in the playoffs, I think he's going to be fine for the regular season. I think he's going to come back and play well. And if he's not efficient, then they will go with Darrell Henderson. They will go with, with that guy and switch it up. Right. Which, maybe you draft Cam Akers and then you draft Hendo later. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's going to happen. And I think if they go with Cam Akers and they give him 350 plus opportunities, I mean, that's a smash. Like, you have to take it. So that's why I'm in on Cam Akers. I think the opportunity share is going to be huge for him, and it's going to cause a breakout. But I just hope that he is efficient. You know what I mean? That he is an efficient running back. That he can get back to what he did in the playoffs last year, where he was at 4.68 yards per carry and 5 yards per carry before they got eliminated by Green Bay. So I love Cam Akers. I love any Los Angeles running back that gets the full workload.
Yep.
Because their offense is really good. But I just don't want to, for people who are like, oh, well, Darrell Henderson, and I'm like, I don't give a rat's toot about Darrell Henderson. Like,
yeah.
What are you talking about?
I don't really care either, but I do think Akers and the only negative is he will probably be on a short leash.
Yes,
because
yeah,
if he does, like you said, if he sucks the first couple of weeks, they will go to Henderson.
Yeah,
absolutely.
they're a team that will go with the hot hand, as Rick said. So
yeah,
that's the drawback. But honestly, that's why I feel like you have to be kind of a little bit prepared for a moment like that. You know,
he has a higher risk than the other two guys you talked about, but his ceiling is just as high.
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't think it's as high as Javonte's.
Right.
But because I do think Henderson, like, I don't know that he can get up to that 350, 400 touch threshold if they're giving Henderson, 35 to 40% of the opportunities. But he's still a top 10 running back if they give him 325,
Yeah.
But you have any more thoughts on Akers or any of these guys?
I think that's about it.
Okay. There you have it. Our top breakout running backs for fantasy football 2022. We actually got done in the allotted time frame for this episode, which is kind of shocking. But anyway, leave in the comments who one of your favorite breakout running backs is. We got a mock draft tomorrow. Be sure to check it out. See you later, guys.
See you.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.